Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed. After coming under fire for conducting secret meetings with Israeli officials, British Minister Preeti Patel has just shockingly resigned from office. These meetings, which included a discussion with Prime Minister Netanyahu and a trip to an Israeli hospital treating Syrian refugees, ignited fierce controversy in England and quickly torpedoed her political career. Patel is said to have had 12 separate meetings with various Israeli officials back in August to discuss improving UK-Israeli relations. At the time, however, she had told the UK's foreign ministry that she was merely on a family vacation. When news first exploded of these undisclosed meetings, it was seen as a breach of policy, though not necessarily a career ender. But it was Patel's trip to an Israeli hospital for Syrian refugees in the Golan Heights that sealed her fate. That's because England, like many of the world's countries, doesn't recognize Israel's control of the Golan Heights. In the eyes of the British government, it doesn't matter what Patel's humanitarian motives were, they see the trip as a complete and total game ender. Those on the other end of the argument, of course, see this as a blatant anti-Israel bias, and an ironic one at that. England has historically refused to designate Hamas's political wing as a terror organization, for example, and also of note is that a top Palestinian official from the PLO all but demanded that the UK's Prime Minister sack Patel over the visit. Prime Minister May has, as it turns out, just accepted Patel's letter of resignation, responding, "It is right that you have decided to resign." Terrible news from the United States. Yet another bloody mass shooting has devastated the country. Police have confirmed 26 dead and at least 20 others injured after a gunman walked into a Baptist church in Texas and proceeded to open fire. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has just sent Israel's condolences to the victims' families. Sunday church services were in session when the first shots rang out, a horrific and tragic setting for what is now the deadliest mass shooting in Texas history. The suspect, 26-year-old Devin Patrick Kelly, entered the church with a ballistic vest and a Ruger semi-automatic rifle. He opened fire, injuring and murdering victims ranging from age 5 to 72. A local resident who happened to have a rifle fired back, sending the suspect fleeing for his car. He crashed his vehicle after a short chase and was found dead inside the car, along with a cache of weapons. At this time, police haven't found a connection between the suspect and the church where he opened fire. In fact, at this time, the sheriff's office has confirmed they haven't been able to identify any motive at all, making the senseless act of violence all the more confusing and all the more heartbreaking. Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad Hariri has just shocked the world by resigning from office. But even more surprising are his parting words. After revealing that there's a plot on his life, Hariri went on to slam both Hezbollah and Iran for spreading chaos and terror throughout the Middle East.
أشير وبكل صراحة ودون مواربة إلى إيران التي ما تحل في مكان إلا وتزرع فيه الفتن والدمار والخراب. يشهد على ذلك تدخلاتها في الشؤون الداخلية للبلدان العربية في لبنان وسوريا والعراق والبحرين واليمن. يدفعه إلى ذلك حقد دفين على الأمة العربية ورغبة جامحة في تدميرها والسيطرة عليها. وللأسف وجدت من أبنائنا من يضع يده في يدها.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has called the sudden resignation a wake-up call to the entire world, one with dire consequences.
Hariri, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, resigning. He said basically Hezbollah took over, which means Iran took over. And I think this is a wake-up call for everyone. It says what the Middle East is really experiencing. It's experiencing the attempt of Iran to conquer the Middle East, to dominate it and subjugate it.
Indeed, Hariri's harsh words against the two largest influences on Lebanon's government, Hezbollah and Iran, show just how dire the situation has become. Of note is the fact that Hariri's own father was a former prime minister of Lebanon and was assassinated back in 2005, allegedly by Hezbollah. That sheds some light on this decision to resign and means Hariri is fully aware of what happens when leaders go against Hezbollah's wishes. Another twist to this story is the fact that Hamas and Hezbollah just held a rare meeting last week to discuss a unified resistance against Israel. With those talks coming amidst the ongoing negotiations for a Hamas-Fatah Palestinian unity government, it clearly means terror organizations are willing to form dangerous new alliances.
The sudden and shocking rift between Saudi Arabia and Lebanon continues to escalate, threatening a new Middle East war that would involve Iran and Hezbollah as well. Well, now it looks like Israel's throwing in its hat into the ring of this conflict as well, aligning itself with Saudi Arabia. Now, this may sound like a surprising turn of events, but considering the Saudis now stand against the common enemies of Iran and Hezbollah, Israel doesn't really have any other choice. We've just received word that Israel's foreign ministry has told its ambassadors all over the world to start backing Saudi Arabia and begin diplomatic efforts against Iran and Hezbollah. Adding more speculation to Israel's alignment with the Saudis are years of rumored arms deals between the two countries, business that has remained strictly off the record and behind closed doors. But the new rift between Saudi Arabia and Iran's proxy in Lebanon could very well make Israel's relationship a public one, uniting them against their mutual enemy. The tensions first erupted just days ago when Lebanon's prime minister resigned while in Saudi Arabia and publicly accused Iran and Hezbollah of seizing control of Lebanon's government.
Well, the American embassy in Iran was overrun 38 years ago by violent anti-American protesters, the beginning of the end for diplomatic ties between Iran and the U.S. And now thousands of Iranians are marching to remember that historic event, renewing the protest by burning American flags and even Israeli symbols. Well, ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here for the analysis. Now, Brett, you know, it's hard to remember a time when ties with Iran weren't at a total standstill.
Sure.
When you see images and reports like these, do you imagine things will ever improve?
Well, the Iranian government has basically spent the past 35 years or so conditioning its people to hate Israel, distrust the U.S., question diplomacy. I mean, everything that really meant advance peace at all. But something I think we should try to remember here is that Iran wasn't always like this. And there are people in Iran right now who remember that time, what it was like. And they're trying to reform things in their country. Now, that's not an easy thing to do, of course, under the current regime.
Sure, a regime that has repeatedly stated its mission to annihilate Israel and maybe also its biggest ally, the United States.
Sure, and that's why you'll see, Israeli symbols popping up at demos like this that are specifically about the U.S. Embassy, because they see Israel and the U.S. as pretty inseparable sometimes. But it's also why you have activists, especially artists, coming out of Iran who are really trying to shed a spotlight on the harsh realities there. In fact, 2 of the last 6 Oscar winners for the Academy Awards foreign film were from Iran, which is important to remember no matter how dark things seem to get, as you'll see right now in the report. Thousands of Iranians have gathered in Tehran, marking the anniversary of the violent 1979 takeover of the American embassy. On that fateful day 38 years ago, angry Iranian militant students stormed the embassy gates, finally taking a number of personnel hostage in a desperate standoff. Relations between Iran and the U.S., including America's biggest ally, Israel, have only decayed ever since. And at this year's rally, less than a month after President Trump's decision to decertify the Iran nuclear deal, it's clear that anger has reached a fever pitch. Iran is seen as the leading aggressor in the Middle East, specifically funding terror organizations worldwide that are committed to utterly eradicating the Jewish state. And the burning of Israeli symbols alongside American effigies are a chilling reminder of the hatred still fresh in many Iranians' minds.
Now, it looks like the Palestinians have just hit the first real speed bump in the road to Hamas-Fatah reconciliation. About a week after Hamas handed over control of all Gaza border crossings to the Palestinian Authority, internal clashes between the Palestinian security forces are now threatening to derail the whole deal. This doesn't come as a complete shock. The complicated ordeal of transferring responsibility from Hamas to the PA was never going to happen overnight. But things took an aggressive turn shortly after the first exchange of power took place. Hamas had expected to keep some of its guards on duty at the border crossings, but after only a few days, they were suddenly dismissed altogether by order of the Palestinian Authority. The overlapping of jurisdiction is more complicated by the fact that hundreds of Hamas's police forces are still on patrol in the area. jobs that the PA is also trying to either absorb or cut altogether. Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah has just publicly announced that he couldn't guarantee the border crossing's safety and operation unless Hamas gave away all security control in the Strip, words that obviously fanned the flames of Hamas's anger. And since the Rafah border crossing with Egypt can't function until this issue is resolved, sadly, it's the ordinary citizens of Gaza who, again, stand to suffer the most from this internal squabbling.
Now, for the first time in 8 months, the Palestinian Authority has finally allowed life-saving medical aid to enter the Gaza Strip. This aid package, over $2 million of critical medicine, comes after months of the PA's blockade against Gaza, a controversial tactic that has, however, given way to the current reconciliation talks with Hamas. ILTV's Aaron Porce is here in the studio to explain the story.
Yes, thank you, Natasha. And actually, you've just touched on really the heart of the issue, i.e., the difficulty for Palestinians living in Gaza to reconcile their deep wanting of a unity between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority with the terrible humanitarian conditions that they're currently living in.
But wouldn't all aspects of this humanitarian crisis come to an end if Hamas and Fatah were to finish their negotiations successfully, or at least most of the issues in this humanitarian crisis?
Unfortunately, that's not terribly clear either. First of all, if we turn to the West Bank, many of the Palestinians living in the West Bank are also living in less than desirable conditions. But if we stick with putting our focus on Gaza, even if unity talks are successful, there are a lot of other issues that need to be addressed. There's electricity shortages, there's food shortages, there's job shortages. And even, again, after the unity talks, even if the Palestinian Authority starts to tackle these issues...
You still have a blockade from Israel.
You still have a blockade
Egypt,
from Israel, and then you still have the fact that the Palestinian Authority was the one to impose a lot of these sanctions on Gaza in the first place, which breeds mistrust among the Gazan population, which that, in turn, threatens everything that they're working for. But I'll tell you a little bit more in my report right now.
Coming amidst ongoing Palestinian unity talks with Hamas, this shipment of medicine is the first real effort by the PA to help the suffering people of Gaza. But many blame the horrific conditions in the Strip, including denying funds for medical treatments and a crippling energy crisis, squarely on the PA to begin with. That's because President Abbas imposed the blockade in order to force Hamas into the current negotiation talks, which so far have yielded success for Abbas's government. Last week, the PA officially took control of all Gaza border crossings from Hamas. And not only that, but Abbas's police chief has just confirmed that all security cooperations with Israel have resumed to full capacity as well.
We do meet normally. Things are normal now. Yeah. It's back.
While the shipment of medical aid, over $2 million worth of medicines and treatments, comes at a critical time, many Gazans are still skeptical that conditions will improve anytime soon. A recent change in Israeli policy just doubled the waiting time for Gazans hoping to secure rare exit visas, meaning that the people of Gaza are still at the mercy of Palestinian leaders to improve the humanitarian crisis.
All right, 9 civilians were just killed by jihadis in a small Druze village inside of Syria, only a few kilometers away from the Israeli-Syrian border. And now, in a rare move, the IDF has said it's willing to defend the Syrian village from further attacks. And that's after hundreds of Israeli Druze villagers attempted to jump the border to protect their Druze brethren. Well, ILTV's Aaron Porce is here with the story. Now, Aaron, why is Israel offering to protect this village in Syria, of all places?
I think it sounds like the Israeli military has agreed to help simply because the Druze community asked. It's not often that the Druze community in Israel asks for much, and after seeing so many of them so committed to helping their brethren on the other side of the border, it looks like it made more sense simply to act militarily than to allow Israeli citizens to continue trying to do it themselves and cross the border.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's an extremely dangerous thing to be doing that can get Israel in a lot more trouble as well. But if Syria, is an enemy state, again, why, I guess, is that more dangerous than staying neutral in the civil war?
It's really kind of the median amount of humanitarian effort that Israel can take in an enemy state like Iran. We help Syria. In Syria, I apologize. Yeah. We help Syrians who cross the border all the time, and the Druze, although the Druze community is spread out everywhere, they're all very much together. So
right, there's definitely a unified community, even though there's a border between both communities.
So as you said, even though we're technically at war, if anything, helping these Druze communities will change perceptions about Israel, will help bring people together.
Well, let's hope.
Okay.
Let's check out your report.
The Druze are a religious minority spread throughout Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and the Palestinian territories. The army retrieved all the Israeli Druze citizens before they were able to cross into Syria, but clearly Israel hasn't ignored how personal this attack was for them.
اجينا نتضامن مع اخوتنا في الجولان وطبعا ننقل الخبر لاخواننا في حضر انه احنا واقفين معهم من كل النواحي وبنطلب احنا من دولة اسرائيل اذا بدها تحتل حضر احنا مستعدين نفوت احنا جنود وبنخدم في جيش الدفاع مستعدين.
As it turns out, a Druze member of Israel's Knesset has just revealed that 4 victims of the Syrian attack are actually members of his extended family. Druze MK Akam Hasson said, quote, "I know that the Assad army uses the Druze for its own ends, and that we trust the IDF. It is our country, but the residents in Hadara are our brothers, our family. We cannot allow them to be hurt," end quote. The army is currently stationed at the Syrian border on high alert.
First arrests were made last week in the FBI's investigation into Trump's possible collusion with Russia. And now President Trump is reportedly furious with his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, for his, quote, bad advice. Vanity Fair has just reported that Trump allegedly no longer trusts Kushner at all. The article claims Trump personally blames Kushner for giving him bad advice, which culminated in the ongoing probe between his campaign and Russia. Though the White House has not commented on the story, Trump apparently called the New York Times shortly after to reaffirm that the FBI special counsel's investigation didn't bother him a bit. "I'm not under investigation," he told reporters. Meanwhile, Kushner and Trump's top Middle East negotiator Jason Greenblatt made a hospital visit to a Palestinian official recovering from a lung transplant. Saeb Erekat is a senior Palestinian negotiator who was recently transferred to a hospital in Washington, D.C. to receive a life-saving lung transplant. Kushner and Greenblatt, both Jewish, made the visit as a show of support.
A leaked recording of former United States Secretary of State John Kerry has just offered some blunt insight into the former United States administration's perception of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In the tape, Kerry can be heard blaming the Israeli leadership for rejecting a two-state solution and praising the Palestinians for, quote, nonviolence. As the former United States Secretary of State, Kerry spent years trying to broker a new round of peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. Things fell apart completely in 2014, though a secret meeting did finally come together in 2016 between Egypt, Jordan, and the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. But as the new leak reveals, Kerry firmly believed that the Israeli leadership was squarely to blame for the diplomatic stalemate. In fact, even at the height of 2015's knife intifada, which saw at least 166 stabbing attacks on Israelis by Palestinian terrorists, Kerry praised what he called Palestinian commitment to nonviolence. Kerry went on to say, quote, "This is overlooked by the general Israeli population because it's not a topic of discussion. Why? Because the majority of the cabinet in the Israeli government has publicly declared they are not ever for a Palestinian state," end quote. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office, in response to the tapes, said it's unfortunate that John Kerry still just doesn't get it.
The fate of former IDF soldier Elor Azaria may be about to change. Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman has just sent an official letter to President Rivlin seeking a full government pardon for the jailed former combat medic. Azaria made headlines last year when video footage surfaced of him delivering a fatal headshot to an unarmed Palestinian attacker lying on the ground. At the time, he was serving in the West Bank city of Hebron. The ensuing trial fiercely divided Israeli society, with many believing Azaria should be jailed for murder and others hailing him as a hero. A military appeals court upheld Azaria's manslaughter charges and 18-month jail sentence earlier this year. But now Israel's defense minister has just appealed to the one man capable of pardoning Azaria and releasing him from prison, President Reuven Rivlin. For now, it remains unclear whether or not President Rivlin will see things the same way his fellow politician does. It's been weeks since these stories have broken, but it never seems to feel any less shocking when we hear of more sexual assault allegations against celebrities like Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein and actor Kevin Spacey. But it turns out these allegations are a necessity because more and more women and victims from around the world are finally speaking up. And now here in Israel, record numbers are joining the call as well by saying, "Me too." Those are the words that have come to define the women's movement against sexual assault. Words that you tragically see all over social media of countless women who say that they too have been victims of abuse. Here in Israel, those words are also evolving into action. New numbers show that calls to women's rape crisis centers in Israel have surged ever since the Me Too campaign first hit the internet. Some centers have seen a 20% spike, while in others, calls have nearly doubled. Women's courage to speak out about these crimes is undoubtedly helped by the countless celebrities who have gone public about their abuse in Hollywood. That's along with rally cries from celebs like Gal Gadot, who call for women everywhere to unite against fear. In related news, police have just arrested a Jerusalem man who was defacing billboards all over the city and removing women's faces from lineups of men. Let's hope this revolution doesn't stop and that Israel will crack down on every last crime against women.
Now, a Romanian tourist was met with quite the shock when she touched down in Ben Gurion Airport yesterday by the news that she was officially Israel's 3 millionth visitor. But the surprises didn't stop there, because to help her celebrate the record-breaking visit was none other than Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, who then gave the lucky visitors a personal tour of the city of Jerusalem. Check it out.
Welcome to Jerusalem.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Tower of David, but I must tell you the truth, we have a problem. Our guide didn't come. So we rapidly found another guide that specially came here to guide you here. Please.
Oh my God, I'm sorry for this outfit. Nice to meet
welcome.
you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You're Mihai.
Nice to meet you.
A special guide.
Why not? You're a special visitor.
Oh my God.
Ioana Isaac and her partner Mihai Georgescu just got the tour of a lifetime. After all, it's not every tourist who gets FaceTime with the Prime Minister of Israel, much less a personal guided tour. Netanyahu escorted the shocked tourists through the City of David Museum, pointing out history and sights along the way, and even shared his personal stash of tasty Jerusalem za'atar spices. But this tour was just one surprise in a huge celebration that began the moment the pair's plane landed in the airport. The couple also got their own limo ride to a luxury penthouse at the Dead Sea, a helicopter tour of the country, a sunset tour along Tel Aviv's boardwalk, and even a gourmet dinner by world-renowned Israeli chef Nir Zouk in his private home. And because this year marks the biggest growth in Israeli tourism to date, clearly everyone has reasons to celebrate.
All right, up next is our top 5 with ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh.
I'm here to give you guys the top 5 technological advances made by Israelis. Well, the first and most commonly known would for sure be Waze, the mobile app developed back in 2008 by an Israeli startup that helps you drive around and even avoid traffic. It's all based on user-generated data straight from your phone's GPS. Waze is very popular in big cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Boston, but you can also find Wazers in Italy, France, Sweden, and the list goes on. At number 2, you know that place you go to when you just need a quick answer to something? Oh yeah, Answers.com. Well, guess what? That site was developed by the Israeli company GoogleNet and founded in Jerusalem. The technology was first pioneered back in 1999, and in 2005, GoogleNet changed its name to Answers Corporation. By 2011, the site has surpassed 11 million answers. At number 3, anyone remember those tiny little chip-like devices that stored all your info, pics, and online files? Yeah, the disk on key or the flash drive comes from Israel. Israeli firm M Systems developed the tech after launching in 2000. 5 years later, PC World called it the world's top 10 gadgets in the last 50 years. And the company was purchased a year later by the SanDisk Corporation for $1.6 billion. Number 4 is for all you bookworms out there. The Java platform that's inside Amazon's best-selling Kindle was, you guessed it, developed here in Israel. Amazon worked with a team in Herzliya to develop a prototype, and when they nailed the design, manufacturing commenced. And by the way, Amazon is a world leader in all things e-reader. And number 5 helped pretty much every high school and college student spice up their school essays. Yes, I'm talking about the computer dictionary and translation program, Babylon. The killer software was developed by an Israeli company called Babylon Software Ltd, based in Or Yehuda, right here in the Holy Land. Amnon Ovadia was the genius entrepreneur who established the company back in 1997. And that's all for today. Stay tuned for our next top 5. Back to you.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.